What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Now, today's special guest is Sall. She is the CEO and founder of a company called Giggle, which she is going to tell you all about. She's had some issues dealing with some crazy people out there, but we're going to get into that. And Giggle is unique because this is actually a social media app, which is specifically for females. So, Sall, how you doing?
I'm really good. Very tired, as all people running new companies are, but good.
Awesome. So I've done a brief intro right there, but why don't you tell the people a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I am the founder and CEO of Giggle, which is a social networking and social media app for females, which is something we have to be specific about these days. I would much prefer to be able to say just for women, but that's not clear enough. It's a place where females can connect to find freelance work, roommates, connect for activism, emotional support, and we're just currently rolling out our new Giggle Talk social media feed. So it's like a feed forum platform just for females to be able to talk freely without the misogynistic abuse that we often experience literally everywhere else.
Wow.
Sort of what
Okay.
I've been for such a long time, like, what would we do? What would we get done if we didn't get interrupted with misogynistic abuse of the time? And well, hopefully we're about to find out.
Okay. Well, the whole term misogynistic abuse, I feel, is sort of being abused quite a lot these days. So I'm kind of curious to know more specifically what that means. But before that, why did you want to create a social media app specifically for women or females? Tell us a little bit about the story behind that.
So when I was 24, I got on a plane and moved to Hollywood wanting to be a screenwriter. And I actually got into the industry relatively quickly, like within a year. I just sat there and wrote screenplays. Really luckily, actually, I wrote a book with another writer, which got optioned to be in television. So we sort of like, I got into the industry, got signed to one of the biggest talent agencies in the world. Like it all sort of happened very quickly. And I was like, wow, like this is amazingly easy. Hollywood's magical. Once I was in the industry, everything changed. I became like, especially when I became like a lone writer. I had a writing partner for a little while, but when it was just me, suddenly I was in rooms with all of these guys, these executives and producers and whatnot, and everything just changed. And one of the things is that I wrote romantic comedies, which doesn't sound like that exciting or sexy at all, but I very much wrote about like sort of strong, very like sort of sexually liberated women who were very like opinionated and a little bit modern, let's just call them modern. And so, you know, when you're in general meetings with these people, you've got to always sort of, you know, I would always call it the Sall show of like justify why you can write this next script or why like your voice is right for something like this. And I would have so many people all the time being like, well, sex is your brand. And I was like, no, I just wrote one movie where like that's kind of something that they do in it. But no, like strong women is my brand. But it was just sort of getting increasingly impossible to sort of convince them of that. And so because they would sort of sexualize everything that I would talk about, I feel like it gave them a like sort of the green light or this sort of justification to start really doing a lot of sexual harassment and assault and things like that. I had one guy at a major studio literally like put his hand down my pants, like sort of grabbed them by in real time. Like it's actually happened. Yeah, it's actually it's actually happened to me. And I'm like, it was just like so bizarre. And then I would like tell people who were sort of in charge of my career, and it was like, oh, well, just go and write a really great script and show him how awesome you are. And I was like, but I never want to be a room alone with this man ever again. And so I wouldn't write the script. And then I'm the unprofessional one. So it really affected my career. And then I was just getting to a point where I was like, I mean, I was having a nervous breakdown. I couldn't really see straight. I couldn't write. I could formulate everything in my head, but the moment I tried to write it would just, I'd go blank. I've since learned from therapy that was just like my brain kind of in a survival mode, because writing meant I'd go into these rooms. But it was also my livelihood. So I was like panicking. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go broke. And so when I eventually came back to Australia, it was supposed to just be for a little holiday, my mum and I were talking, and she just said, like, let's do something to sort of make sure women have a really easily accessible support network.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we knew nothing about creating an app or anything of this world. We thought it'd be easy.
Oh no.
Yeah, if only we knew then what we knew. And so that's where it came from. It was just like, so all women could have a female network sort of in the palm of their hand at all times, if necessary. Because when I started therapy for all of what I had been through, my therapist said to me that you need to learn to connect with people again, and especially with women. And it was right, because say a place like Hollywood, and I found a lot of cities are like this, they are very isolated. Mm-hmm. And while there is nothing, sort of in this COVID that we're living in at the moment, there's nothing that replaces interaction with human beings. But the next best thing is being able to talk to people online.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, that's where it came from. Really good, good intention, like an political place.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, when was it that you came back to Australia after this experience in Hollywood?
So I came back here in August 2019. So I arrived there in August 2009.
Okay.
So yeah, and then but I'd been in Hollywood until 2016, 17. Mm-hmm. And then I went to New York because one morning I sort of just was like, I can't be here anymore. I knew I couldn't get myself out of it. So I went to New York because I thought, well, there's still industry there. I'm not giving up on the dream, because I refused to give up until I had no choice. Yep. And so I was like, I'll go to New York. And so that was awesome. That was actually really fun, but I still it was all just mentally and emotionally. I was just so broken. I was terrified to be around people, and, it affects everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you went through that. I think it's an all too familiar story. I'm in the world of music, and for over 15 years, literally from my teenage years, I've always known Hollywood and music, like the mainstream music industry, like these worlds are shady. They are really, really shady. I say that like I'm a guy, but like you hear so many stories, you've heard all these things over the years, over the decades, and it's like, there's not normally smoke without a fire, right? Certain stories would come out, or this person gets caught doing something, or this or that, but I'm like, man, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I've spoken to so many people. I've spoken to other women who have stories like this. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, the whole thing was sort of, people called it a conspiracy theory, right? Oh, all these things people say about Hollywood or the entertainment, and everything's a conspiracy theory, right? Until it's real and it's obvious. And then a couple years ago, there was the whole Me Too thing, which, sort of popped up and perhaps overcorrected and started sort of taking out and harming guys who hadn't actually done anything wrong, and it went way beyond the scope it was supposed to. But at least it did highlight some of the problems, so at least people are like, okay, we can see that there's an issue here. I just think it really sort of lost its focus and its targeting, and it just became this sort of whack-a-mole game. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, a few things, because for example, there were sometimes in the real, when we were sort of in the eye of the storm of Me Too, there were a few occasions where I was like, no, that's not what we're talking about. For example, I wrote an article in defense of Aziz Ansari. I didn't think that was a Me Too situation, in the same way that a Harvey Weinstein thing was.
Sure.
So there's definitely the need to separate sexual harassment, sexual assault with just a bad date or things like that. But sometimes I do get annoyed with when a lot of people say there was so much of the Me Too and everything. I'm one, and I know every girl I know, I've never ever outed any of the guys. I've never gone after them. None of them have been punished by me.
Can I jump in here? Why?
Because I don't want to be associated with them.
Because you don't want to be associated with the men, you mean?
Yeah. Because if I was to do it now, some of them some of them are names some of them are not. But they're well-known people. If I was to out them, my name's going to be associated with them. I don't want it.
But isn't that what allows and has allowed this to go on for so many decades? Because I've spoken, funnily enough, I spoke to another woman I know who's a musician, and she said something kind of similar, and I was like, I get that on one hand, but also isn't that how legitimate predators, they get away with this stuff because they sort of instill this chill, and then no one wants to, they'll say, oh, this and this happened, but they'll say, but I can't say the name. And then you're kind of like, well, if this person's legitimately a criminal, right? Like an actual criminal who is assaulting, raping, harassing people, then if no one knows who they are, like no justice can ever really be done. And then they're free to continue to do the same thing to more and more young women.
No justice would be done. Absolutely no justice would be done. I'm years away from it now. Even at the time, I remember there was one specific occasion when the next morning when I told some friends what had happened, because I was very, very shaken up by it. And there was like the police, and I'm like, I have nothing. It would be my word against his. And I was like, I don't even have money. I have nothing to be able to help me in this situation. And so even now, I mean, the most I could say is, like, if you're watching, I'm not afraid to say your name if that's what it ever came to. But the closest I did, there was one guy's a producer who was a producer in a movie that I just thought, like, considering how hard it is to get movies made about women, and that he was a producer on it, I was like, really? And it bothered me so much. So I did send a little bit of a warning shot to that, to just be like, this is who you're actually dealing with, and not a nice person. But otherwise, no. My thing has been more of moving forward, channeling it all into something positive, rather than sitting there and dwelling. Because I was very angry at first, because I stayed in that toxic situation for such a long time because I refused to give up on what I wanted to, my dream, what I wanted to do in my life. And then, so when I got to the point I just couldn't write, and it was just, I was just wasting my life at that point. I could hardly get out of bed. I was so angry that I had to give up what I wanted to do because of these people, until through therapy and then getting the idea for Giggle and starting to work on it, I realized that, I was writing these movies about strong, independent women, and I was fighting this stupid fight every single day, just to try and get movies made, which, like, it's one of the things I used to think about all the time. I'm like, these are just movies. Like, we're not curing anything here. Like, we're at best entertaining the people who are doing great stuff. And so when I realized that doing something like Giggle, where I could just work with real women every day and create something that was actually useful, my anger went away. I was like, okay, I can make sense of these experiences that I had. I wish I didn't have them, but I can use them to do something better for the future. So that was, I'm at peace with it now. But that said, I still can't really write anything. I can do emails pretty well, but that's about it. And I will never, ever live in Hollywood or write for money ever again.
Yeah, that's wild. And it also, there's a lot of things that I find frustrating about a lot of that on a lot of levels. And one of them is the fact that this is going to, I feel like, look, it's a very, very, very tiny percentage and number of guys who do stuff like this.
100%.
Like it's a microscopic it's a microscopic number, and it's like, but
I have so many guy friends. I have so many amazing friends in my life. Like, this is one of the things where it's like, obviously not all men, but it's just in terms of abuse, it's mainly men who do it. Yeah. And I suppose there is part of it where, and I talk about this quite frequently, that we have gone from Me Too to vagina owners, or whatever the hell we're calling women.
We'll get into that. Don't worry. We will get into that. Yeah.
So and then having to constantly always be like, not all men. It's like,
I
think that there's something that we do have to make, say, women are saying this very, very clearly. When we're talking about this, we are never saying all men. We 100% know. We know exactly who our protectors are.
Yeah.
And who Sometimes they're a bit iffy on who's
Yeah, no, I just think it's crazy that, you know, these guys who do this are basically allowed to continue with this impunity, and largely because, again, in the world of music and Hollywood and all that, right, it draws dreamers. It draws people who, you know, you've said multiple times, this was my dream, this was my dream. Same thing happens in the music industry, this is the dream. And if someone is in a position of power, then they can easily take advantage of that. And because that's the power dynamic, those often young women do not want to speak out because they're worried about their career or they're worried about this. But at the same time, I'm always like, yeah, I get that. But at the same time, by not doing so, you're allowing that cycle to continue, right? And then it even validates that guy's power of going, okay, well, ain't nothing going to happen to me. Like I can keep doing this.
Literally, I remember one time I'd had this is with a director. He has spent this entire meeting groping me. Like it was not in an honest situation. It was so gross. And I called my manager after the meeting and told him what happened. And I said, can I go to the producers and tell them this? Because this is just really inappropriate and really gross.
Yeah.
And he went, do you want your movie made?
That's so messed up though. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I think people just need to draw. I don't know. Maybe it's the way I'm wired. Like I'm not a woman. I'm not anybody else. I'm just me. And I draw such hard lines in the sand on certain things, you know? So I'm one of those people where if something violates like a strong principle I have, then I'm just like I don't care about I always get people like, man, even just on social media, people like, oh my gosh, aren't you worried about getting canceled or this? I'm like, dude, I fear God. Period. I fear no man. I fear no human being. Like I want to, right? Like, if I want to talk, I will talk. I will say what is truthful. I will share my opinion, whatever. If they want to try to do this or try to do that or try to do that, then, you know, and it's interesting, you know, actually in music, like, I mean, I started in music 15 years ago. And one of the reasons I always chose to stay independent is so that power dynamic never can exist. Yeah. No one can be above me telling me, you know, if I were with a record label, they'd be telling me to delete 5 tweets a day. And I'd be like, right? Every single day, they'd be ringing me being like, dude, like, you can't do that. So, but let's move on a little bit move on a little bit more towards what you're doing now with Giggle. So tell us a little bit about creating the app and what it's really about.
Okay, yeah. So now, like, you know, so I had all of my experiences of getting abused. So I decided to create an app. Now I get abused for creating the app. Abused in a different way.
I just want to give you a hug, Sal. I just want to give you a hug.
It's so crazy. But yeah, so I was very, very lucky. So I'll never forget the conversation when my mom and I first said, we're going to create an app. We were literally sitting in her kitchen having a glass of wine, although we were on like the 7th glass of wine at this point. And my mom said to my dad, we're going to create an app. And he was like, yeah, okay. But when we started talking about the idea, he actually did take it seriously. And he woke up at 4 o'clock every morning to sort of research. He's a big researcher and perfectionist and all of that. And he learned about the industry, started teaching me stuff and said, okay, we need to create a working prototype. So we spent 6 months. I would draw pictures of it. I actually have it here, like my little stick figures that I would draw, that then we would put into this program to create the demo that he had taught himself. And then we were able to go to investors and we were able to go to developers and do that. And then it was, we sort of had plans of how we were going to launch Giggle like at the beginning of last year, but we had it just on the App Store and Google Play. And that's when it was discovered by the trans rights activists of Twitter and Reddit. And so it just it got discovered by them, and suddenly we were being called transphobic, and I had no idea of anything that was.
Man. Oh wow! Well, we should have spoken years ago. I could have warned you. Oh, that's the most aggressive so-called activist mob on planet Earth. Those are not nice people.
They're not nice people.
Those are not nice people.
No. They're like, I always say, like, I think, you know, obviously at the very beginning when it was like the rights for trans people obviously came from a very, very good place and much needed place. Like, you shouldn't be fired for being trans and, or like denied housing or anything. These are all like basic human things that we all
everybody agrees on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But and even like last year when I was educating myself, I was like so polite and wanted to be so respectful. I am now at the point where I'm like, oh my God. I've been going around of like the people who like, it's like the people who've just like starting to learn about gender ideology and they all look fantastic. And then you've got the people who've been in it for like 6 months and we just look like zombies who like clawing our hair out because it is just absolutely so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yes. When we were developing Giggle, me being completely unaware of what was actually happening, I actually fought for trans women to be welcome on Giggle. I did not have the support of everybody else in the team, but I was like, at the time I was like, no, it's 2019. And I was thinking very much of the people, like basically the amazing transsexual women who are on the side of all of us women who are fighting for this. Like I've met so many amazing transsexual women and they prefer to be called transsexual women. They've all asked me to do that.
Okay.
And like the sort of irony of it all is they don't want to be in our spaces. They're totally fine. They know exactly who they are. They're so honest and upfront about their journey, how they got there, who they are, everything that's happened to them. And we have this great alliance and we help each other out. These trans people have been completely ignored by the activists and everything. So, which just it blows my mind and it makes me so very angry. But so, when I started like learning, it took not very long. I'm talking minutes to see what was happening because I saw that, women who were trying to stop female genital mutilation were getting called TERFs because they said the word female and, vaginas aren't inherently female and just madness.
Yes.
And so I've just educated myself and I'm very lucky that with the work that I do, I can basically just have stuff like podcasts or documentaries playing all day. And then I read as much as I can that, I've become like a prisoner of what I know now. I'm like, I can't unsee it.
Well, once you've experienced, especially that particular brand of mob, then
yes. Oh, I lost you.
Oh, sorry, we dropped out for a moment. Okay. I was saying that once you've experienced that flavor of mob in particular, you realize that it's not coming from a good place. These people are not. And as with a lot of activists, they don't represent the people they claim to.
100%.
Right? They don't. So there's a gigantic difference between I don't even like all these like acronyms, TRAs, trans rights activists who are claiming that they are on the side of, trans people or whatever. Just like you'll have, that you get activists like this in everything, right? There are people who claim to be feminist activists, but they're not remotely representative of women. There's people who claim to be, black activists or BLM activists, and what they're pushing for is not supported by the majority of people they claim to represent, etc. And it gets a little bit wild. So tell me a little bit about your experience with that. What actually happened?
Okay, well, so in February last year was the first one I ever had, and I was just, I've been called transphobic, and I was just like, I'm not transphobic. Like, I was so mortified. I was heartbroken. And then I actually sort of went on to Reddit and Twitter, and I started tried to find where a lot of this was coming from, and that's where I stumbled across sort of radical feminists, gender critical feminists, and I was talking to trans rights activists, and both groups told me to go and educate myself. So I was like, okay, fair enough. And then realized that actually the radical feminists are really, really right in what they're saying here. Especially the women I've talked to since, I think we all owe a really big collective drink to so many lesbians who are 10 years into this, because they were sounding the first alarm and no one was listening. And so we owe a lot of gratitude because they've sort of experienced more abuse than any of us have in this particular issue.
Yeah.
It's
kind of funny. It's kind of funny that the two, shall we say, groups that really saw this coming down the pipeline over the past decade were conservatives, right? Like straight up conservatives.
Yeah.
And then like ironically, like the more sort of, I guess, radical feminists is, I guess that's what they call themselves. So yeah, it's kind of funny that there was that's it sort of led to this weird, almost like alliance of people who are just like, wait, no, like a man is a man, a woman is a woman, and then like the sort of liberal / progressives have kind of they're just running madly off this cliff where biology and reality just don't matter anymore.
In this fight, you find yourself with some strange bedfellows of people where you're like, no partner and anything else. Like, but it's like, you know what? Like, so you agree, you acknowledge biological reality and free speech, two really fundamental components of a civilized society. Okay, have all the other opinions you want. I don't care if I disagree with you on other things. If we can agree on these two really great things, fantastic. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, there's lots of people that I'm like, oh, I would never have like enjoyed your company, but like, no, I do. And then so my thing now with the journey of it is I very rarely engage sort of the everyday Twitter trolls or whatever, because especially when I see like a lot of them, they are really young people. I actually think a lot of them, I mean, they're brainwashed. They're under this sort of spell, and they have been fed absolute lies. I want to help them. I don't have hate towards those people, even when they send me horrible stuff. The people that I really dislike are the ones who are in charge of all of this. And that includes a lot of journalists, especially in England, who are peddling this crap.
Yep.
And different organizations. They're ushering it in here into Australia now. And I've been saying this lately. I'm like, Australians cannot ever claim ignorance. It's like, so the people in England at the beginning who were like, oh, no, definitely everything, we all mean well, we want to be on the right side of history, totally coming from the right place. Australia just cannot ignore half a decade of chaos and be like, oh, it'll be different here.
Why Australia specifically? Because I've seen this coming down the pipeline. I've seen this coming down the pipeline for a decade. So, and I'm here in the UK. So I'm wondering if the Australia is different in some regard.
Oh yeah, it's only just starting. They're so softly getting laws in, and no one will talk about it. Okay. And you sound like a crazy person when you start telling people about it. Like, I do feel like I should be wearing like a little tinfoil hat when I'm going and telling everybody, saying like, they want to call you vagina owner and say that biological is real, and everyone's going, that is impossible. And I'm like, it's not on Twitter. I swear, like they're playing sport. They're like, in England now, it's not breastfeeding, it's chest feeding. I'm like, this is real. And you feel absolutely insane. And I think that that's part of the design of it, because people just go like, you can't be serious.
Yeah, it's the ability to. Do you know what I've learned very much so in many things, especially over the last few years, is that I think most people, and I don't even like saying this, but I don't think most people really practice what I call second order or third order, let alone fourth order thinking, right? They only think about stage one, right? They're not thinking about the impact of this. So for ages ago, back in, I don't know, I remember in 2015 or 2014 or 2015, after, seeing some of this ideology stuff and people just being able to identify as whatever they want. And I was telling people, you're going to get men just identifying as women, and they're going to start beating women in sports, and they're going to start going into their prisons, and they're going to start doing this. And people like Zuby, come on, man, like just, kind of get same thing they're doing now with this, my reaction to this whole lockdowns and stuff, just get with the program. Why can't you just get with the program? And I'm like, you are not seeing what the second and third and fourth order effects of this are going to be. If you make it as simple that I can be here with my beard and my penis and my testicles, and I can just tell people that I'm a woman, and now that has to be accepted by society. And then, 4 years later, I am now the British women's deadlift record holder. Right? So I'm like, can you not see that this was an obvious consequence? How did you not see this?
Did you see the article today from the AV Club saying, like, basically, I can't remember the exact headline, but it's essentially like Buffalo Bill got a really hard time in Silence of the Lambs, and we really need to recontextualize this because of
the thing on cannibalism, was it? Sorry, I think something different.
That's the Cosmo article.
Oh, okay. I can't keep up.
Whole other issue.
Okay.
made me stop dating for the rest of my life. I'm like, I would happily die alone than be eaten by Armie Hammer. No. This one was the AV Club today, and it's just basically, and there's also in England going to be a play called Cowardice, but it's told from the perspective of Buffalo Bill or something, because basically Buffalo Bill has a really bad reputation and gives a bad reputation to trans people, because Buffalo Bill, even though Hannibal Lecter said he's not a transsexual. But anyway, so I was like thinking this today, I'm like, hang on, there are these articles and this art that are coming out being like, we have to be really sympathetic to serial killers if they wear women's clothes. And I'm like, I'm not looking forward to the convergence of sympathetic to serial killers who wear women's clothes. And if a man wears a dress, he's a woman and can go into a woman's space. There is no happy ending there. None.
Do you know the thing I find, I guess, ironically hilarious about a lot of this is that, to me, and again, I've been saying this for years, because, you know, the more sort of like liberal feminist types, the types who really, really don't tend to like me, you know, they want to talk, you know, patriarchy. And I'm like, this is the freaking patriarchy. I'm like, this is the actual patriarchy. The patriarchy is me with my beard being able to go, I'm a woman, right? Yeah. And I go, and I can just run into the changing rooms, go into the showers, compete in sports or whatever. And anyone who says anything about it, I just label them a transphobe or even a misogynist or some kind of bigot or some kind of hateful whatever. And I just totally get away with it scot-free. I'm like, okay, that's actual. I'm like, that is the actual misogyny there.
Does anyone on this planet think that I can walk into a meeting and say, hey, fellas, I'm a guy, he, him, treat me how you would treat a guy? Not a single man on the planet is doing that. I've wondered if I changed my pronouns if I actually put pronouns in my bio on Twitter, but if I made them he, him, would I be treated differently? Of course not.
More people would think you're crazy. People would be like, oh gosh, it's another one of those pronouns in the bio, people, and this one's even more confusing.
Well, I'm like, if you're going to force me to put pronouns in my bio, well, cool. They're going to be he, him, and I'm going to demand to be treated like a man, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. This is not about women's rights or even trans men's rights.
No, it's not. It's a big power play. It's a massive game, and it's a form of bullying. That's what it is. I think I tweeted this yesterday. I said, you know, bullies these days pretend to be doing it for the good of society. And I was talking about a lot of things there. I wasn't just talking about one thing. I was talking about a lot of things, right? When I was growing up, like, bullies were just bullies, right? They just did it to be mean and to be unkind and whatever. Whereas now, people are really bullying each other in different ways and trying to control each other and whatever, but they're doing it under this guise of, this is for the good of society. Like, I'm a great person because I'm doing this. And it's like, no, it's the same hostility, it's the same venom, it's the same bullying, it's the same cruelty, but you're just hiding it by throwing a couple things in your bio that make you look like a good person, or by claiming you're doing it on behalf of this oppressed group or this minority or whatever. But you can see that it's fake, because as soon as, you know, these same people, they'll be there talking about, oh, well, you know, you just don't like a strong, independent woman, or, you know, we need to uplift black voices. And then as soon as a woman who's actually strong and independent minded disagrees with them, woo, the misogyny is coming out. As soon as a black person disagrees with them, woo, the racism comes out, you know, and it's just so transparent.
I've tweeted about this quite a lot, that in this, say, the trans rights thing, one of the things they'll call it white feminism. And I'm like, you are ignoring all of the amazing voices of women from every region, every race, every culture, all around the world. It's not my problem that you're ignoring them. They are speaking up. The only thing we have in common is that we are female and we care about our rights.
Yep.
We come from all different places. It's the amount of times that I will see somebody with like Black Lives Matter in their bio, and then they're telling a black woman to shut up.
Oh yeah. Yep. Standard.
I think the only people who say that to black women have Black Lives Matter in their thing. So I'm like, none of this is about actual treating people better or finding equality for everyone. It's thought control.
Yeah.
It's complete authoritarian. It's absolute. I'm at the point with it all. I'm like, if you can't see it, either you don't want to see it.
Yeah. But would it be fair to say, though? I mean, I think it took you a while to see it, right? Because I think a lot of times people don't see it until it affects them directly, and then the dominoes fall really quickly, and it's like, oh, okay, this is not is not what they claim.
I would say in terms of like the gender stuff, the J.K. Rowling stuff last year, because that was international news. That was a huge big game changer because like. It was just front page news for so long. So everyone at this point kind of has a little bit of an idea. I will say, one of the things that is the most difficult to deal with when you are female is the women who are on the side of these activists, who will call up women TERFs, who will say that trans women. I was invited on a feminist podcast late last year because it had been planned for months, and then the night before she was doing some research on me and went, hang on.
Yeah.
Asked if I thought trans women were women, and I said, like, I have total respect for trans women, but Giggle is a platform for females, biological women.
Yep.
And she said, like, can't talk to you. And I'm like, it's hard not to get angry at that, but at the same time, I try to think of it as logically and rationally as possible. I think that like men and women are coming from this differently. We have different experiences in the world. Men and women are different. This shouldn't be controversial to say.
How dare you? We're supposed to simultaneously believe that we're different, but we're also the same, and that we're totally interchangeable, and that you can just switch between one and the other if you feel like it. And like, we're meant to believe all of these things simultaneously, which there's no logical way that they can all be true simultaneously. So it's weird.
Remember like 20 years ago, like if a stand-up comedian would talk about like the differences between men and women, you'd like eye roll and like, oh, this hack. And now if a comedian went out there and said that, you'd be like, oh my God, this is the most controversial person.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I'm kind of curious. I mean, are you someone who calls yourself a feminist?
So I'm having a bit of a journey with this stuff at the moment for the sole reason, like, short answer is yes.
Okay.
However, I'm a little bit right now being like, I just hate labels. I think we've gone too far with labels. Labels aren't helping anybody. I would say, like, for example, when like in the last year, when I like in all of my reading and educating myself, like say a lot of like the radical feminism stuff, which is root feminism, it's just original feminism. I really think in terms of branding, the word radical could be helped if that was dropped. But
feminism has a lot of branding issues. I'll say that.
I mean,
it does. It does. Yeah.
Women at this point know that no matter what we do, there's a lot of people aren't going to be fans of us, so it really doesn't matter. So I would defend it in that respect. But yeah, I don't. I don't think it's healthy if you just align yourself to one philosophy or one ideology, as it were, or any theories of thoughts. You should always be thinking for yourself. So there are some times where say, I'm not going to agree with someone just because they're a woman or just because they're a feminist. Yeah. There's nothing in feminism that says that all women have to agree. In fact, back when we weren't allowed to have opinions,
now there sort of is. Now there sort of is. It's an orthodoxy.
We probably all got along much better when all we talked about was the weather and who we were going to marry. Like, what was there to disagree on? Now we can, the whole point of feminism is to have your own opinions and be able to have a voice. So I have no problem if I'm having a discussion or an argument with another woman. I just don't like it if someone is bringing ideology or feelings to a facts fight, because then it's like, well, there's just no point. And you engage with that. But yeah, I will defend like the word feminist and feminism to the ground, because the crap that people give to that is rooted in misogyny.
Strong disagree.
Oh, tell me why.
Strong disagree. I think conflating criticism of feminism with misogyny is way off. Well, and even look, even this whole discussion that we're having, I would say that so it's funny because even if you are looking at so there's clearly this split between what people call liberal feminism and gender critical or radical feminism, right? In fact, they're opposites because they're the very basis of the word woman is not even agreed upon. Right. So if someone is right, like which that's like the most core fundamental thing. So
it's actually really simple to actually like work through that. Liberal feminism isn't feminism. It just isn't. They're allowed to think whatever they want. Like if you want to think men are men and all, you can. It's just not feminism.
But the truth is, the reality is, I understand what you're saying, but the reality is, in 2021. Liberal feminism is the dominant type of feminism. If someone calls themselves a feminist, if someone hears the word feminist or feminism,
and do whatever guys say. They're all cute and adorable and hot and half naked. Of course, it's so popular.
That's why even with the whole sports thing, right? With the whole sports issue, people blame it on feminism, right? People say, "Look, this is the feminist did this. The feminists let this. The feminists let." I blame a lot of stuff on feminism, but that's a different. We can talk about that one later, Sal. But yeah, I mean, I personally, I've been of the opinion for many, many years that word is sullied and cannot be reclaimed. That's my view. I think it's, I don't know, like I think, you know, the first two waves kind of did what they were supposed to, but in the modern understanding of it, it's just, it's gone, I think.
Look, I mean, like the first and second wave feminists did amazing stuff. But I mean, if it was all cured, we wouldn't be sitting here trying to work out what the hell a woman is, would we?
Yeah, but so the people who you're fighting against on that call themselves feminists. This is the thing.
Oh, but totally. I mean, they call themselves activists as well, and we've already established that they're not. So
I know.
I mean, anyone can give themselves whatever title that they want. That's literally the problem. True. You can call yourself a feminist all you want. You doesn't make you any more than wearing a dress makes you.
Okay, in your opinion, what does feminism mean, or what does it mean to be a feminist?
Okay, so it's at its basic core, the equalities of the sexes, where you're not going to be oppressed based on political, social, or economic needs. Right? That's the most basic thing, like dictionary definition of feminism.
So what's the difference between that and just an equalist or a decent person?
Because I say this to people all the time, is that when feminism is just in relation to women. So it's just for females. So if there is something out there, say we're dealing, say with like female genital mutilation, like that's because we're just talking, it's strictly about females. So it's going to be a feminist issue. Okay. But because
people don't even agree on that. That's kind of my point, right? So some people say feminism is just for females, and others say it just simply means believing in equality of the sexes. And I'm like, well, which one? Because it can't be both.
Yeah, I mean, but we could say the sky is blue, and someone's going to say it's green. So, like,
yeah, carry on anyway.
But then, what were we saying? So, what feminism is? Oh yeah. So then you have like these people like sort of like I don't like the man hating or anything like that. Again, there's sort of, in my experience with feminism, never been anything like that. Like, God, I don't hate men yet. I mean, sometimes I'm like, you're going to have to kill me. This is ridiculous. How forgiving can I be?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, I will say, I was raised quite gender blind. I was raised like, my dad was has always been very, very influential in my upbringing and like what books I should read. I mean, my dad had me reading Animal Farm when I was like 11, and I was just, I was just like, it's just like talking animals on a farm. But so he always told me to think and ask questions, and there was never this idea that I couldn't do something. So when I got to Hollywood, and I'd been in university for a while, and there was a bit of like crap there, but nothing really. And I was just sort of like, oh, you're just stuck at university. It doesn't even matter. It's not the real world. So it actually took me a little while to work out in Hollywood what was actually happening. Because and then I sort of blamed myself. I was like, oh my God, was the dress I was wearing too short or something? But actually, most times I got assaulted, I was wearing jeans.
Sure.
So yeah, it wasn't never a situation of what I was wearing. But so, so being raised like sort of, I was never thinking that I couldn't do anything, or that that being a woman was like a hindrance in any way. I've never been someone who throws the word misogynist out. I've thrown it out more in the last year than I have in the rest of my life because of that. There's just some things where you go, that is what it is. Like, I don't, like, some things is just someone being a shitty person. They don't hate women, blah, blah, blah. But then, like, this current thing about, like, because we're not having discussions right now about the word man. We're just not. We're having everything about language. It's all women's language.
It is. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you that this is the real misogyny.
Yes.
Right. You know, I've had people who call me a misogynist. Right. And I'm like, no, right. No, I'm like, this is, but people tend to project. Right. So whatever they are.
100%. And it is because, like, for example, when I told some people that I was coming on here, like, and I put it on Twitter, and there were some women who were like, why do you love Zuby? And the thing that was brought up was always because, okay, so you and I have very, very different opinions on abortion rights.
Okay.
Now, I was trying to say to people, and I will always say this, if you're like against abortion, that doesn't make you a misogynist. Everyone is entitled to have their opinions on these sorts of things. There are many women who are against it. Only time I'm going to have a problem with it is if they're forcing their opinions on me. But everybody can have their own way of living their life and their own choices in that respect. So I would never say that is like that's not misogyny.
It's not. It's a cheap tactic. It's the same way that people want to call you transphobic. It's the exact same thing, right? It's this idea that, oh, the only way you can hold that view is because you hate those people. It's like, what? Like, no, right?
Today I got called like in the same thing. It was like I'm a transphobic, racist, and bad grammar. It's like, I can spell. Thank you very much.
You can spell. You're like the other two. Like, I'll give you the other two, but I can spell. Put a comma in a sentence. Yeah, people just these days it's just a tactic, right? People just throw out isms and phobias so that they don't actually have to have a conversation, right? If they can just label you this thing, then the conversation, is over. And it works on a lot of people. It doesn't work on me. I've been called everything from a white supremacist to I don't know, like, no, right? Which I've been labeled the most stupid things in the world, and it doesn't work on me because I'm just like, look, if you want to have a conversation, if you don't want to have a conversation, cool. Like, I don't need to have every debate in the world. If you want to have like an actual debate and not just be like calling each other's phobias and isms, then we can have those discussions and, understand each other's perspectives. Maybe we still won't agree, but you'll at least know where I'm coming from. Because look, the truth is very few people's beliefs are motivated by hatred, let alone hatred of a specific group. Completely. Right. So they
are coming from the right place and are doing the right thing.
Right. Like, you brought up the abortion issue. We don't need to go deep on that. Right. But I could very easily say that anyone who is right, anyone who's so-called pro-choice, I could be like, well, you hate babies. You hate babies. You want to kill babies. Just like people who are, as they'll say to people who are pro-life, they'll be like, oh, you hate women. And I'm like, this is a 2-year-old version of this whole discussion and debate. Like, if you cannot comprehend why someone may hold either of these positions beyond they hate a certain group of human beings, then you're really not that smart.
Totally. I mean, there's different ways, like what plays out in life as well. Like, so for example, as I was saying before, like, I have no problem with someone being pro-life. I'm not anti-life. Like, I'm
not anti-choice. It's a dumb framing. It's a dishonest framing.
Exactly, dumb framing. But then at the same time, I would never have a relationship with somebody who was against abortion, because that would put me in a precarious situation.
That's fair. I'm the other end, right? And that's fine. Yeah, that's fine, right? And so, that's a whole deep conversation. I'd be happy to have it with you at some point, actually, because I think it would be quite interesting. But coming back to what we were talking about with Giggle, though. So I know when you reached out to me, actually, before we did this podcast, you were saying that you were receiving all sorts of abuse online. I even saw some people sent you death threats on Twitter and all of this. So what's going on with all that? Where's that coming from?
It's coming from, I don't think I've ever been sent a death threat by a trans person. I don't think so. And there's all men. There's so many men in this trans rights thing, movement, whatever it is, who are just dudes.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Constantly going, like, these guys don't care about trans rights.
No.
At all. The people who actually care, this is the craziest part, are the trans exclusionary radical feminists. We're like, be who you want to be. We want you to be safe. We would like to create a third space. We would like to help in this way. They're the bigots. These guys who pretend to be on the side of trans people, no, they're just using it as an excuse to attack women and get away with it and be called heroes. Like it's currently happening, like 1 or 2 a week of these quite well-known Twitter guys are just having absolute nervous breakdowns over this. And just, I've never seen anything like it. Like, we'll just be like, I don't care about my career. I don't care if I ever work again. Trans people deserve rights. And it's like, well, we agree on that. You give up your life.
This is something that happens a lot, right? Which is where it's this straw manning, right? Where people are arguing against something that no one is arguing the opposite, right? You're seeing this with this whole trans thing, right? You're saying people are there like, trans people should have rights. Trans people are human beings. I'm like, I've never heard anybody of anywhere on the political spectrum say that trans people are not human beings or that trans people should not have fair and equal rights under the law. It's like, that's not even the conversation, right? Nobody is out there arguing that Black lives don't matter, right? So people are there like, yeah, but Black lives matter. I'm like, do you think I didn't know that? Right? Do you think like my whole life, right? My whole family, like it wasn't until 2020 that I suddenly oh my gosh, thank you, white liberal on Twitter for telling me that my life matters. Like, I didn't know, I was not aware before this, like, thanks for the hashtag, thanks for the black square on Instagram, amazing, thank you. The whole thing, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, what's wrong with people? Like, can we just have like the actual discussion rather than just setting up this ridiculous hyperbolic straw man and arguing against something that everyone already agrees on? No one is saying like, oh yeah, I want this whole demographic to be. It
is also the thing. Trans people have rights. They already exist.
They're already there.
Yeah. The only rights they don't have overall is rights to women's spaces.
Crush you in your sports. They're working on that one.
It comes down to it. That's what the fight is over. And to say it's not, you're going to have to prove what rights trans people don't have. Because, like, if I was to say, like, so for example, like I've had Owen Jones come after me. I've had like Guardian journalists here in Australia come after me. Owen Jones was actually really interesting because I've actually blocked him since in life is small.
Oh wow, okay. Well, he's blocked everyone else. So.
Well, I got to him first. I didn't block him for such a long time because you want to hear what they're saying and everything. And got to the point where I'm like, you're saying the same thing. Like. You're a parrot at this point. So, but he had written a tweet or something along the lines of, because it was about COVID and saying like journalists should not print any misinformation about vaccines and then not experience repercussions or something. And I was like, and so I just retweeted it saying journalists should not say any false information about women who are fighting for women's rights without repercussions of the misogyny that's creating. And then he retweeted me,
of course,
calling me anti-trans, and I was like, "Well, you just proved my point."
Yep. It's amazing. It
did what I told you not to do.
Look, there have never been, where we are right now in the world, there have never been so many easy opportunities for, I'm going to just straight up say, low status, weak people, whether they're men or they're women, to virtue signal and pretend that they're some kind of hero or warrior or whatever, by actually being misogynistic, racist, all the isms that they want to throw at other people, right? So the audacity of this little dweeby guy to, straight up, like he's, the beta male archetype, right? To like actually, okay, I'm going to start harassing or insulting women under the guise that I'm the good guy because I'm pretending to support men who are claiming to be women. Like, my brain just kind of goes like, what is going my mind also blows. My mind also blows, Sal, because this is so unique to the Western world, right? So right. So
yes,
what's that?
It's the ultimate privilege. If we want to live in
it's so strange
world, this is people creating problems.
It is.
We could be solving so many things that really need solving and being focused on right now.
Yeah.
We're talking about whether women can have penises.
It's so bizarre to me because I don't know if you know, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, right? I lived in Saudi Arabia for 2 decades, and my family background is from Nigeria, right? And in either of these countries,
we are from Nigeria using giggle. Makes me very happy.
Oh, nice. I was going to say, like in either of these countries, like even having the, like, I wouldn't even be able to explain this conversation. They'd be like, what are you right? They're just like, what are you even talking about? If I show them my deadlift record tweet, which went viral, they'll just look at it and be like, I don't get it. Like,
I had a trans rights activist one time tell me, they were like, did you know that trans people don't even have rights in Saudi Arabia? And I was like, do you know who else doesn't have rights in Saudi Arabia? Most people.
People have rights. People currently have way more rights in Saudi Arabia than they do here. I'll tell you that.
Well,
you can leave your house without government.
Women can't. I mean, let's put it into perspective.
Saudi Arabia is actually. I left there in 2008, and actually, I had a guy from Saudi on my podcast last year, which was really interesting. I've got lots of Saudi women who follow me on Twitter as well, so I'm quite keen to get one of them on the podcast. But it's changed a lot. It seems like it's changed a lot since when was that, like last 12, 13 years. So actually I'm kind of interested now now you can actually go and visit, right? They have tourist visas now. So when the world starts going back to normal, actually I'm quite curious to go back to Saudi and sort of see what the situation is like over there now. Because I know what it was like when I was growing up throughout the 90s and the thousands. And there have been a lot of dramatic shifts. There have been a lot of dramatic shifts.
Oh, definitely. I mean, but you're still like, I sort of follow all of these different women who still get put in prison because of fighting for women's rights and things like this. And
they're going to start doing that to you too in Australia. So careful.
Oh, I mean, it's so crazy. Because I went on Sky News 2 weeks ago now. Then I had all these people mocking me because, so now I'm apparently right wing. And I'm like, no, I would happily talk. I'll talk to, first of all, I talk to anyone. I talk to the devil himself if he asks, because that's just who I am. But I'm also like, if the liberal media won't speak to me, and they won't, they ignore it.
Yep.
Who am I going to speak to? Because they are ushering this stuff into Australia. They are so secretly changing our laws, which is so insulting because gay marriage has only been legal for a few years in Australia, and it had to go to what's called a plebiscite, which is this ridiculous referendum thing, whole country involved, special vote for it. It was so offensive that it had to, at that point, I think it was 2016, 17 when it came through, in that day and age, that's the length that it had to go to. But it's democracy, that's what happened. But they are just putting gender stuff into laws with no one knowing about it. Yep. And then you sound like you're wearing a tinfoil hat if you start talking about it, or you're immediately a transphobe. And so at this point, I don't care about being called a transphobe.
Yeah.
Transphobe, the definition is just someone who acknowledges biology.
Yeah, you have to be able, the truth is, and again, I wish it didn't take people so long to realize this, but you have to be able to just shrug off and dismiss the labels, because it's all tactics. Like as soon as you start defending yourself and having to say, oh no, I'm not, you're now on the back foot, and they're just going to come at you harder. You've just got to be able to be like.
Do you think? Because I think there are quite a few. There's some say journalists who are really in the thick of this, and they don't have a soul. But then there's others who I could completely understand if they could be sitting there going oh, whoops, big mistake. This is all nonsense. But hell no, I'm not speaking up about it. I don't want to deal with this.
Yep.
Deal with the backlash. And so when you create that, people are too scared to tell the truth.
Yep. Yeah.
What does it leave you? That's what I think now. Anybody who is in a position where they can speak up, you have an obligation to.
I'm with you.
No one, because it's been going along this long because people will basically letting everyone get away with it. We're jumping the shark now.
Yep.
I just think that if you honestly going to say to a woman who has just spent 60 hours pushing out a baby, you're not a mother and you're not breastfeeding, you're chest feeding. That's where we are. And it's just the stupidest. It's not like, I don't ever like using offended because I don't care if someone's offended. But
it's genuinely offensive.
It's insulting.
It's genuinely insulting. And look, I said this back. I think I said this back in 2018 or 2019. But I said the next decade is going to be the decade of weird alliances. And funnily enough, one of the alliances I saw was that, like, I don't know, the people who call themselves like radical or gender critical feminists, like I literally said this. I said they are going to have to align with those conservatives and so-called right wingers that they have been, talking all this stuff about for years, because this particular issue is going to bring it to a head. It's a bit like how, sane religious people are aligning with sane atheists to tackle like the whole woke ideology thing, right? 100%. Because
but that's the whole thing with the LGB Alliance, which is always getting called a hate group, which is why Oz had his breakdown last week, but literally they have tweeted and done articles and spoken so many times that there was like a Christian sort of right-wing group that they had to align themselves with. Because it was a strategic alliance, and they're right. Like they're both right. Like I'm always kind of like, look, people can have opinions, but we need to be able, unless we want society to go to hell, we need to be able to agree on facts, right? If we start getting to the state, like some people are like, why is this conversation even important? Like, who cares? Whatever. And I'm like, look, if they can force millions and millions of people. Again, this is the second order and third order thinking, right? It's if you can force millions of people to accept what is clearly false, right? It's just not true, right? If you can get 500,000 people to believe that the sky actually is yellow, just by the fact, and we can all see it's blue, but if you can force people or coerce them to believe it's yellow, then everything, or to believe that 2 + 2 = 5, then society's lost, right? Because if you can get people to just accept that lie and all go along with the lie for long enough, it's propaganda, right? It's brainwashing. Then we're done, because we can't even have conversations, right? If I believe 2 + 2 = 4, and you believe 2 + 2 = 5, we can't do mathematics, right? And all the calculations are now broken, right? If we can't just accept, okay, this is a man. Like it's like apocalyptic stuff. Like society cannot exist. That's why like the language stuff is important. And like I used to, because we have agreed upon language, that is civilized society. Like I used to be very polite about the pronoun stuff. And I feel bad towards, for the really amazing trans people who I do love and respect. But I've sort of had to, like, I will sometimes like use their preferred pronouns, and in person I would always call someone like their name or whatever they want to be called by. That's totally fine. But I do think that with this pronoun thing, that was the very, very beginning of language having different things, because we've gone from
edge of the wedge.
Yeah, we've gone from calling it's innocent and it's fine to call a he a she, and to, there are articles about like endometriosis, and it's for vagina owners. And I when I was on Sky News, I did this thing. I was like, I genuinely want to ask all of these people who are ushering this stuff in, would you go home to your daughter and say, you're not going to grow up to be a strong, independent woman. You're going to grow up to be a strong, independent vagina owner. And this is all in the name of inclusivity. It's nonsense.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
If you had told me if you told me 18 months ago that the biggest controversy of Giggle is that I would be, that women with penises aren't welcome, I would have thought you were crazy. I actually, because in Giggle support, we do have an abortion category. I always thought that was going to be the most controversial thing. How naive am I? No one's ever mentioned it. Like, it's just because women need to connect about that sort of stuff. These are the issues why we need to have spaces where we can talk. There's a lot of different issues that women have. I'm all for men having their own spaces as well. I think it'd be really, really healthy. The only reason they ever got a bad reputation is because once upon a time it was where all the decisions were being made. So if we keep the decision-making parts of the world, and we keep like this colorful world that we live in and we all coexist in, it's really nice to just have little refuges to go to.
Yeah. Well, the reality is, look, if there was a male equivalent of giggle, it would also get attacked, and it would also get called misogynistic, and it would get called this and that.
It's called 4chan. Sometimes I think it already exists.
Yeah, but women can use 4chan. There's no rule against women using 4chan. It's just male dominated.
Yeah,
there's plenty of male dominated space. I'm just being real. Like, if I made an app that was specifically for women, then it's gonna get backlash, and again, it's gonna get backlash from people who label themselves as feminists. Ironically,
but I would say every single word, because I would pose this question quite a lot. The people try and do it to me as like a gotcha, and I'm like, no, I'm all for it. So many of the radical feminists who are on my side, they say the same thing. I've actually never heard one say we're against it. I think it would be very healthy if men were getting together to connect and talk. This is like humanity. We're like and keeping that going.
We are. I'm actually running late for my weekly patriarchy meeting as we speak. Gonna plan on how to put the boot down on women.
We always have ritual, or you taught this stuff. Like which way? Because both are terrifying, but we need to know.
The term the patriarchy does always crack me up, because the way some people talk about it does seem like all these like millions or billions of men, like we're just meeting, like, okay, sitting around this table, like okay, what are those broads up to right now, like how are we gonna
but this is also the thing, is that when like you're in this like absolutely crazy time that you're in now, where you have to use these otherwise ridiculous terms like the patriarchy, and when you have to use them in a serious way and say them with a straight face, and you're like, I really wish we didn't have to speak like this. If we could just agree on basic facts, we could move on. We should be so far past all of this than what we are.
It's true. And look, the reality is that most people actually are. Most people actually are. With all of these issues, race, gender, LGBT stuff, whatever, like in the modern Western world, majority of people are just decent. They want to get on with life. Like they're pretty chill. They're actually, like, we actually live in a hyper tolerant society. Funnily enough, I think that's one of the weaknesses. All right. I think that's actually been subverted, because I think our society is so tolerant and liberal over here that something that is more authoritarian and less tolerant can always subvert it. Can always subvert it, right? It doesn't matter if it comes from ideology or from more fundamentalist, religion potentially, or it comes from this. It's a weak underbelly. I think that's the sort of long-term weakness of liberalism, right? Because if it's like, okay, well, we have to kind of like accept and tolerate kind of everything, then people can kind of take that weapon and now swing it at you and then start to shut you out. I think that's why this whole, whether it's the trans rights activist stuff, or like, again, like this whole woke movement and whatever, and this cancel culture, it's why it's effective, because it strikes at that weak point, because you don't want to kind of do it back, right? Like if you actually value liberalism, you don't want to then be like, okay, well, we're going to cancel you, because it's like, no, we need to hear all ideas,
Yeah, but it's what I was saying sort of at the very beginning, that men and women are different. And I think that in this particular thing, they come into it from really different ways. Like, for example, like why I'm more empathetic to women who are wrapped up in this and saying that men are women and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, they get it harder.
Well, if I was starting a movement like this, the first thing I would do, if I was like whoever the evil genius is behind it, it's like Dr. Evil, I would get some women on my side. That's the best thing to do. So I just think that, like, and women also, if you can get women to sort of back this and use that sort of like the nurturing side of women to your advantage. Also, like I see in some of the situations, and I never want to sound condescending, because obviously women are, their own people and everything. So never like misinterpret what I'm saying. But I think that there are some where they're in a bit of an abusive relationship with this.
It's true. I think also, this is a fact. They've done studies on this, which is generally women also care more about political correctness than men do, on average. So yeah, on average, women care a lot more about being politically correct. So I think that, and then also realistically, if you want to talk about like actual misogyny, is I think that people just in general, like you were talking about, these people sending you these things online or whatever, is I think that, or even your experience in Hollywood, right, is I think that people there are people who just do see, like people who are predatory, like in any sense, they tend to see women as kind of like an easier target, right? It's easier to bully a woman than it might be to a man.
Yes, but it's also what men are promised is different from what women are promised. Say in Hollywood, for example, the image of a man being successful, whether he's a successful agent, producer, director, actor, whatever, what does he promise? Beautiful women.
Yeah.
He's in love with them. It doesn't matter anything else about him. He can just be hideous. He's going to be.
It's true.
It's surrounded by supermodels.
Yep.
What are women promised? Like what, an extra cat to live with? Like what was I working towards? Utter loneliness and bitterness apparently was all I was ever going to get. So our motivations then for doing things can often be very different. And I would deal with men in Hollywood with this all the time, where I could tell like things, like especially like when we were sort of in our mid-late 20s, and that they were like, I had lots of guys that I knew who, they were graduating from being agents assistants to being agents and being executives and things, and they're just like, oh, so much closer to the goal, like finally these hot girls are going to start dating me.
Yep.
I've always had this thing with stuff like that, like, and I used to debate men about it all the time, because they would always say about women in Hollywood that they're just like superficial and gold diggers and whatever, and I was like, okay, like, even take that to be true. For men to be found attractive, they just have to be successful by their own admission. That's what a lot of men say. Like, I really want, which is essentially attainable for most people. Okay, I've got to find the fountain of youth somehow. I have to somehow stay 26 forever.
Well, oh gosh, this is going to open a whole nother can of worms. So I'm gonna. We won't go into this one. We won't go into this one yet. But
different things. It's just I really think like at the end of the day we are promised different things, and so like I think it's very clear. Like when I see at the moment, say with what is this huge attack on women right now, I can understand and I have some empathy for women who are on the other side of it right now, who sort of like in battle for the enemy. I get it. Like
survival tactic. Yeah, I know. I get it. It's cowardly though. Let's call it what it is. There's a lot of cowardice.
It's definitely getting closer to the point where you can't deny that. Like there's a woman in Australia. She's like the executive something of change.org here. And she's just horrible, constantly calling women TERFs and all this stuff. And like I had a guy who had blocked him because he was abusing me. Then he came out with a different account where he basically had videos of himself masturbating on it. And then you've got these other women, like, it was so disgusting. And then women like this particular woman, she was like justifying it. And I like contacted like the publication where he's been writing at, just being like, look, I'm against cancel culture, but this is happening. I think this really does cross the line. And like justifying it, going like, oh, well, it's this thing because, but you're trans exclusionary.
Yeah, it's really bizarre.
You deserve the sexual harassment and stuff like that. And I'm like, no. This is very much normalizing a very dangerous thing. I do have a bit of a theory that some of the men that are involved in this and supporting it, it's punishment for me too. We went too far. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think it started before Me Too. I know it started way before Me Too. I think it's deeper than that.
Yeah, 100%. But I think, especially in the last few years, the leverage that it has gotten, how much it's just like, because I feel like it's escalating every day. It is. And so I just think that the momentum that it got, how like sort of the acceleration, I think there's some powerful men out there that went okie dokie.
Yeah, it's possible. Look, the reality with a lot of these things that affect our society is, there are sort of certain things and decisions that I truly believe are kind of made at a very high level, and those people know what they're doing, right? They're malicious. They know what they're doing. They know how they're manipulating and propagandizing people. But then once people kind of buy into it, then they're just useful idiots, right? They're just running along, kind of doing the damage without even knowing the source of what they're saying, right? So even people who are on board with this gender ideology stuff, right? They probably don't know who Judith Butler is. They probably don't know who John Money is, right? They don't even know where they don't know who, Foucault and Derrida is. They don't even know the source of the stuff that they are talking about, right?
It is weird that it's like a cult with no specific leader right now. It would be better if there was one person.
Just one person.
Yeah.
Well, there are people, there are architects, but the architects are no longer with us.
They're definitely like, there's just, one of the things as well, the voices that I think are really important, that really need to be elevated in all of this right now, are the voices of the detransitioning women. They are completely ignored, but they have so much information.
Yeah,
they know
the narrative.
But they know this world. They were in. They got into this through Tumblr. They know all of the ideology back to front. They know the dynamics of how everything works. They've gone through the hormones. They've gone through the process. They're coming out of that now, and they know how they've been treated, how they've been completely abandoned by this community.
Yeah.
And I think that you should bring a detransitioner onto the podcast, because they do have really amazing things to talk about.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hey, it's real talk with Zuby. I try to do what I say on the tin. Agree, disagree, alternate perspectives. That's kind of the point of the whole thing. But Sal, I know this is one of those episodes where I feel like, man, we could go into so many things and talk for so long, and I'd love to have you back on in the future. But we're gonna have to wrap up this episode fairly shortly. So where can people find you online if they want to check you out and find out what you're doing?
Okay, so I'm on Twitter at Sall Tweets, 2 L's. And I actually, if I looked distant just before, it was because I had somebody just shaking at me that the Giggle talk just went live on Android. So if anyone watching can now download the Android version. It's been 24 hours waiting for that. So that's very exciting.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm only on Twitter, and then Giggle, spelled Giggle, is available on iOS and Android. So App Store and Google Play to download. Awesome. And you know what? So we have security in place to make sure it stays female only. It works. We have human beings that monitor it 24/7. It would be really nice if men just went, hey, it's not for me, and just ignored it.
I grab my phone and start creating it.
You can't get on there, but then we have we get abusive reviews and all this stuff. And I'm just like, look, I have managed to exist in a world with Grindr for many, many years now. I accept that Grindr is not for me. It doesn't affect my life. I go to places where they are for me. So it's because we get some criticism as well, from the male community, that we have gatekeeping on Giggle. And it's like, well, yeah, if you guys just respected female spaces and just went, fine.
I was going to say, there's no such thing as the male community. There's males, there's females. There's no male community. It sort of suggests like we're all like connected to each other in some network or something. It's like
sometimes I wonder, Zuby.
Sall Grover, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're welcome. And I wish you good luck. I wish you good luck with the app. I think this is an important conversation. We've touched on a lot of important stuff. And
yes.
I wish you strength to continue with all the backlash and stuff you're getting, but you'll get through it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Put some respect on my name. Sick like a pain.